The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Tonight is a big election night. 172 delegates are available on the Republican primary side. 462 delegates are available on the Democratic primary side. I have thoughts on both, but first we should establish what the numbers are. We will start with the Republicans, where Ted Cruz has already been mathematically eliminated, and he could be widely out of contention if he doesn't do well tonight. Delegate totals as of right now: Donald Trump, 844, Ted Cruz, 543, Marco Rubio, who dropped out of this race weeks ago, 171, has not relinquished his delegates, and John Kasich, the Republican governor of Ohio, still in there, 148 delegates, needed for nomination 1237. So what is available tonight? Tonight, April 26th, we have Connecticut with 28 delegates available. We have Delaware, which is a winner-take-all state with 16 delegates available. We have Maryland, which is a winner-take-most state, 38. And then, of course, Pennsylvania and Rhode Island, 71 and 19 delegates, respectively. So the real question tonight is, will Kasich or Cruz get any delegates? Let's look at the polling for tonight's elections. In Connecticut, Trump dominating, more than 50% of the vote. John Kasich in second place. In Delaware, Trump dominating, more than 55% in polls. Cruz and Kasich roughly tied, Kasich slightly ahead. In Maryland, Trump just under 50%. Kasich in second place again. Pennsylvania, Trump just under 50%, Ted Cruz in second place. And in Rhode Island, Trump over 50% and John Kasich in second place. So you may notice, Lewis, that Ted Cruz is in third place just about everywhere tonight. There is a real possibility that Ted Cruz and John Kasich win nothing tonight in terms of just straight up wins. And there are real questions, Lewis, about whether they can even add any delegates tonight.
It is, yeah. Trump is looking like a true billionaire in this with these numbers, Dave. I'm guessing that, I mean, Cruz or Kasich, they're not going to outperform the polls by 20 points. I mean, it's clear that Trump is going to win every state tonight.
The Cruz narrative has been a vote for Kasich is a vote for Trump. But tonight, a vote for Cruz appears to be a vote for Trump, since it's actually John Kasich who is in second place in all but one of tonight's polls. What to watch for tonight? If Donald Trump wins all 5 states, and there's every indication that he will, that Cruz-Kasich divide and conquer pact, which we're calling Crazic, is basically destroyed and made totally impotent to the extent that it ever had power to begin with. If Cruz and Kasich win no delegates tonight, how do they justify a path to victory here?
They hope that there's still a contested convention, and they hope that the party decides to be undemocratic and give someone else the nomination.
Maryland awards 24 of 38 delegates to the winners of congressional districts, 3 apiece. And Ted Cruz has been targeting some rural areas of Maryland, so maybe he could pick up some delegates there. Rhode Island has 19 delegates awarded on a proportional basis, and Cruz might not even reach the 10% threshold in any of those contests. So Kasich could have a shot there with some delegates, but you have a situation here where it is completely open and overt that the non-Trump strategy, if you're a candidate on the Republican side and your name is not Donald Trump, if you are an insider, an establishment Republican, an official, and your support is not behind Trump, the strategy now is contested convention. The idea of your guy winning is completely evaporated.
Yeah, and is it going to come to that? I mean, can we say that Trump is not going to get all the delegates he needs?
I still have been looking at the numbers every day. There is not an indication to me that Donald Trump is going to secure 1237 before the convention. Now, some have been increasingly saying, well, listen, if he gets to 1,200, or even if he gets to 1,150 or 1,125 or within 100 of that 1,237, it's basically a win because there's not going to be a real case to be made that anyone but Trump should get the nomination. It is an undeniable reality, though, that as far as a front runner, Trump is the weakest front runner in more than 40 years. I've said that, and the numbers bear that out. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I maintain that Trump is not going to secure this nomination before the Republican convention in Cleveland.
Maybe the Republican establishment will kind of take the Charles Koch method of thinking here and then say, you know what, maybe Hillary wouldn't be that bad for us, and we'll just give Trump the nomination and we'll
knowing that Hillary does best against him rather than the other two.
Yeah, I could see them going for that.
Tonight, Bernie Sanders must get some wins to maintain the semblance of a chance of securing the Democratic primary. If he's going to keep a path to a pre-convention win open, he needs to win tonight. And my calculations are that if Bernie Sanders doesn't get 60% of the delegates tonight, his path becomes almost impossible. Now, I know that there are Bernie supporters who get mad at me anytime I'm even remotely realistic about the numbers. To be clear, I voted for Bernie Sanders here in Massachusetts. I would love it if Bernie Sanders were the Democratic nominee. But what good would it be to any of us if I came on this program, Lewis, and just pretended like Bernie Sanders has a likely path or even a moderately likely path? Bernie needs to win probably 60% of the delegates tonight.
Yeah, this is the same reason we don't talk about unicorns. We just try to be realistic here and discuss reality and the numbers.
Thank you.
David, the hate mail is going to come in anyway. It's going to happen. I don't even think we need the disclaimers because it's just expected.
Well, let's skip the disclaimers then and get right into the numbers. Where are the delegate totals as of this morning? Hillary Clinton, 1,446. Bernie Sanders, 1,202. That is a 244 delegate gap between Clinton and Sanders. Of course, the number needed for the Democratic nomination is 2,383. My magic number for Bernie tonight, Lewis, and I will allow you to evaluate this. My magic number is 277. Bernie needs 277 delegates tonight to have a credible, continued, possible path.
I don't have a magic number, but...
I thought yours was 9. I mean, having nothing to do with elections. I just thought you liked 9.
9's okay. Well, since no one else is throwing any magical numbers at me, yours sounds good.
Let's look at what is available tonight on the Democratic side. In Connecticut, 70 delegates. In Delaware, 31. Maryland and Pennsylvania, the big prizes, 118 and 210 respectively, and Rhode Island, 33 delegates. The obvious next question that you and I and everybody listening, Lewis, I want to have the conversation of what do the polls look like tonight for the Democrats? Well, let's go through it. In Connecticut, Hillary Clinton is about +6, 49 to 43, 44. To be clear, some of these numbers are a Real Clear Politics average of recent polls. In Delaware and in Rhode Island, we don't have that much data, so it's based just on one poll, and that can be wrong, and you'll notice there are still lots of undecideds. In Delaware, Hillary Clinton is +7 in the most recent poll, 45 to 38. In Maryland, Hillary is ahead 57 to 33. In Pennsylvania, Hillary Clinton is ahead 54 to 38. And in Rhode Island, where we have just one recent poll, and it may not be that comprehensive, Hillary Clinton ahead 44 to 41. So there's lots of missing data, some scant polling. Bernie Sanders, based on either average of recent polls or single polls, depending on availability, is polling no higher than 43.7% in any of tonight's states, that state being Connecticut. If Bernie Sanders is going to overperform the polls, the most likely wins for him, Lewis, are Connecticut and Rhode Island, which, unfortunately, when compared to Maryland and Pennsylvania, where Hillary Clinton is well ahead, are the smaller states with fewer delegates. So, 277, my magic number for Bernie. To achieve that, he's going to need some magic tonight. But you know what? It's not really magic. It's people going out and voting, and it could happen, and we'll see, and we'll have the results tomorrow.
But isn't that a magical thing? Yes, I want everyone to vote for Bernie.
Yeah.
And there are just too many uninformed liberals voting for Hillary Clinton. Dave, it's always possible that Hillary will cough so hard that her head explodes, and Bernie Sanders is the nominee.
Yeah, well, that I think we should maybe put a pause on until it happens and not necessarily jump to that right away. If Bernie Sanders does win Rhode Island and Connecticut and Hillary wins Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, that's 2 wins for Bernie and 3 for Hillary. That doesn't necessarily help Bernie too much. He will still fall further behind. So we will see. We may be able tomorrow, Lewis, to make a pretty definitive statement about the future of the Democratic race, one way or the other.
And you have to be careful when you make those statements, because you could get, Dave, you could get beaten up by a herd of Bernie bros.
All right, we will take a break. I am on Twitter at @DPacman. Lewis is on Twitter at @LewisMotomedy, and we will be back right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Jamie Whalen. Jamie, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. Jamie gets access to the bonus show, the commercial-free audio feed, the commercial-free video feed, so many other great member benefits, including an upcoming member town hall with Lewis and with me. We will be making a big announcement about that very soon. Of course, you can sign up, get instant access to the bonus show and all of those other benefits at davidpakman.com/membership. Sign up today. You will love it. Lewis does. And that, for me, is really the standard by which I judge most things. Okay, let's check out my most popular Instagram pictures from the last week. Of course, I'm on Instagram at david.pakman. Instagram.com/David.Pakman. The second most popular picture from the last week was me, Lewis, at the Boston Marathon. This has become an iconic picture, reminiscent of that amazing picture of the steel workers in New York City having lunch up on the crossbeams very high above Manhattan. This picture, I am told, by very few people, but at least by a couple people, is truly an iconic picture. The Boston Marathon of 2016, below the iconic Citgo sign. Quite a picture, Lewis, if I must say myself. And I didn't really do anything special. I mean, everybody standing there got this exact same picture. I basically went up to people who were already taking photographs. It wasn't, this is no great achievement of photography, but the second most popular picture on my Instagram in the last week.
All right. It's a nice one. Yeah. And I just want to remind everyone, Dave was at the marathon, not in the marathon.
That's correct.
Now, these marathons, we've read the studies that after a certain amount of time, the exercise, the cardiovascular stuff, you start damaging your heart.
That's correct.
You're burning muscle. You're probably not doing your joints any favors when you're running marathons.
So you don't advocate long-distance running?
Not if you can avoid it. Yeah. Okay. A marathon just seems way too much to me. And while it's an incredible achievement,
no doubt,
I would never do that to myself. I would never do that to my body.
I'm not too interested in running more than 5Ks. And even those I try to do sparingly because, there's more and more information about the damage that, especially as we start to get old, Lewis, running can do to the joints, particularly long distance. Okay, but in any case, the picture did very well. And the most popular picture from my Instagram feed from the last week is me in Las Vegas, Nevada at Mike Papantonio's conference. I am flanked by Abby Martin, formerly of RT, currently of the Empire Files, and Sam Cedar, formerly of Air America Radio and such films as Who's the Caboose, and the voice of the health inspector in Bob's Burgers, Sam Cedar, host of The Majority Report, with Sam Cedar. Great to see a lot of different progressives from progressive media, people with progressives, but with varieties of different views and a diversity of views represented. Always good to see people, Lewis. A lot of good work got done and hopefully a lot of good things coming for progressive media.
Well, certainly a lot of Instagram likes or whatever people do with photos on Instagram.
Right.
You gotta spread the gospel.
Follow me on Instagram. I'm on there at david.pakman. Okay, 78-year-old actor, comedian Bill Cosby is facing trial over a 2004 encounter at his home with a then Temple University employee who says she was drugged and molested by Bill Cosby. Cosby claims they engaged in consensual sex acts. This is one of dozens of women to make similar allegations against Cosby. And the big news over the last 12 hours is that a Pennsylvania appeals court rejected Cosby's attempt to throw out the criminal case because of what he called a decade-old deal not to prosecute him. And the mid-level state superior court ruled yesterday that the criminal sex assault case can go forward. The former prosecutor, Bruce Castor, has said he did promise never to prosecute Cosby and urged him to testify in this woman's 2005 civil lawsuit. But now the release of that testimony has led to a new prosecutor. You'll remember Bill Cosby did get arrested some months ago. And in a lengthy deposition, Cosby acknowledged a series of affairs in spite of being married for a long time, and said he did obtain quaaludes to give to women that he hoped to seduce, although he claims the women wanted to be given the quaaludes. Cosby has not yet entered a plea. He could potentially appeal this again to the state Supreme Court. It would probably just serve to delay the case, maybe. And Cosby is involved in a number of legal battles over this simultaneously. So where are you on this, Lewis? Cosby is reportedly going blind. He's not in the best health. A couple of people suggested, listen, the reality is he's an old guy, not in the best health. If the attorney working with him, attorneys, can delay this long enough, maybe he never sees a trial, or if he does, he never sees the inside of a prison cell, if indeed there would be a conviction, which is by no means a guarantee. He is innocent until proven guilty. Innocent until proven guilty, Lewis, of course.
Yes, no doubt. But I still would like to see. I'm glad this is happening, and if found guilty, I want to know. I want that trial to happen, and we shouldn't just say, well, he's old, forget about it.
I 100% support the notion of innocent until proven guilty. That is what is afforded to all accused in the United States as a matter of principle. Colloquially, speaking to Lewis, speaking to you and our audience, as friends in a casual conversation, Cosby has been accused of raping women for 30 years, dating back to the 80s, maybe even the 70s. He's admitted to drugging women, although supposedly with their consent. He's been married for decades and has cheated on his wife countless times. He trots her out there to sit by him as he denies these accusations, which we know at least partially elements of them are true. The drugging is true. He claims it was consensual. The affairs are true, etc. Are we to believe that 40 women, most of whom don't know each other, over periods of time spanning decades, are all lying right now about a nearly 80-year-old comedian? As a matter of law, he is, of course, innocent until proven guilty, but this is an opinion show, and we are free to give our sense of it. And it is hard to draw up a conspiracy that would explain this.
We are of the opinion that, yes, he's guilty and he did it. There's no motivation for all of these women to do this now. It makes no sense that they're all colluding. I mean, I do believe that, yes, perhaps many of them did offer to say, sure, I'll take these quaaludes. Yeah, let's get messed up. It doesn't mean they consented to everything else that may have happened.
There has been another hacking to death incident in Bangladesh by suspected Islamic extremists. To catch you up, if you haven't been following this, that last year, Dr. Avijit Roy was hacked to death by assailants with cleavers. Last year, Oyasakur Rahman was hacked to death by extremists with cleavers. Last year, secular blogger Ananta Bijoy Das was hacked to death by extremists with cleavers. And last year, Science and Rationalists Association of India organizer Niloy Chatterjee was decapitated in his home and had his hands cut off. Last year, 43-year-old Faisal Aragan Dipan was found dead in his office. And earlier this month, or maybe late March, I believe it was earlier this month, 28-year-old Nazimuddin Samad was hacked to death for purportedly promoting atheism. And now we have learned that 58-year-old university professor Rezaul Karim Siddiqui has been hacked to death in Bangladesh. He was attacked with machetes as he left home to go to work. Police say the attack is very similar to the killings of secular bloggers and atheists by suspected Islamic extremists. However, Lewis, we do have a bit of a different situation here. Supposed Islamic State militants say, yeah, we killed him for, quote, calling to atheism in Bangladesh. The problem is this man has not actually written anything controversial. Every indication is that he was not really an atheist. Friends say he was not an atheist. Others say he was not calling anyone to atheism. So the possibility here, Lewis, is the political situation in Bangladesh is out of control, right? The current ruling party has been sort of culling the opposition party. Among politicians in Bangladesh, religion often doesn't really mean that much. So this could be more political, and they may have staged this in a way to be reminiscent of these past targetings of secular, atheists, etc., bloggers and writers and researchers, scholars, but that actually this was a politically motivated killing. It's possible, and this does seem to be slightly different than the ones we've seen.
Yes, it's possible, but these Islamic State militants or associated militants, whatever, they usually don't lie about this type of thing because they don't really have a reason to. So I believe them when they say they did this, and when they accept responsibility for other attacks and murders. I find that that's generally trustworthy information.
Yeah, although it's possible that they're not that directly involved in every individual instance or action that is taking place, and generally it sort of follows the MO that we've seen, and they have no particular reason to think that it was anybody other than someone who has pledged allegiance to them, so to speak. I don't know. There are differences, and the big difference is the Friends are saying that this guy wasn't an atheist and he wasn't calling to atheism, and we also have to consider they have no reason to lie.
That is true. At the same time, while there was no written material promoting atheism or blogs or whatever, anything like that, it probably doesn't take much. I mean, if you were just having a conversation or speaking among friends or peers about something, I mean, it probably really doesn't take much to set some of these people off.
Whatever the reasons for the killing is horrific, and the problems in Bangladesh don't seem at all like they're going to be resolved anytime soon. Will we ever get the truth about this story? I don't really know. We'll take a break. More after this with economist Richard Wolff.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome back to the show Professor Emeritus of Economics at my alma mater, the University of Massachusetts, economist Richard Wolff. Professor Wolff, we've been talking extensively about the Panama Papers, which are this set of over 11 million leaked documents from the firm Mossack Fonseca in Panama. And what I want to start with you is, what is your sense of the really big story here? Some saying the big story are the particulars of David Cameron, while others are saying that's a distraction. The big story has been how African countries have been raped and pillaged. Others saying the real story is that so much of what was leaked is actually legal. What's your sense of the focus here?
Actually, I would pick a different item as the basic focus. I think what the Mossack Fonseca law firm's revealed files show us is yet another glimpse, not that we really need it, but another glimpse into the vast mechanisms that exist in a world capitalist system to do two things. Number one, to hide your wealth, and number two, to evade paying taxes on your wealth and your income by means of hiding it, so that we deprive countless societies of the revenue from taxing wealth and corporate activity that could make the lives literally of the entire planet much, much better than it now is, because of the hiding and the tax evasion that firms like Mossack Fonseca specialize in allowing to happen.
And is it important in your mind to distinguish? You use the word evade taxes, and typically we talk about tax evasion, which is not legal, and we talk about tax avoidance, which is using legal means. Maybe they are incredibly plutocratic means or immoral means, but legal means to reduce one's tax liability. The Panama Papers exposed both. Is this a relevant distinction, practically speaking?
Well, for the world as a whole, I don't think so. I think the way I see it is as follows. Large corporations and wealthy individuals have tried very hard and with considerable success to either write the kinds of laws or to amend the kinds of laws they want and need to either hide their wealth or minimize their taxes. They have also shown us through countless examples that if and when they cannot get the laws to do for them what they want, they are perfectly prepared to work out illegal or extra legal mechanisms toward the exact same end. The reason, for example, Panama is the place that got exposed is because Panama is one of the places in the world that makes a little extra money by pandering to this very process. They've written their laws in such a way as to make it attractive for companies, shell companies they're called, to be formed there. And likewise, they have enabled their clients of these law firms, for example, to move in and out of Panama very easily, and therefore to hide their wealth relatively without difficulty. And so they're in competition with the dozens of other countries that do the same thing in the Caribbean, in Europe, in Asia, and so on. So I am not persuaded that the line between legal and extra legal is terribly meaningful in terms of what the economics of all of this amounts to.
We learned, to the extent that maybe we weren't completely convinced of it already, and many of us were, we learned about the incredible size of this apparatus for tax avoidance / evasion and the shell companies, et cetera, through these leaks. Given that this apparatus is so extensive, there's really no one single point. I mean, as you said, if it's not Panama, there are other countries in the Caribbean that are facilitating these types of mechanisms. We also saw that there were individuals from countless states across most continents that were taking advantage of these mechanisms. Should the focus be on changing the laws around what makes this possible, or should the focus be to expose it and make it politically unpalatable so that it will have consequences? What might be most effective?
Well, I think both of the things you just mentioned would be steps in the right direction. It's hard for me to see how this is going to work the way the world is organized today, since however effective we are in one country, at least for a while, to take steps to make that kind of behavior harder, there are so many other countries that will jump in to take advantage of the process that what we'll see is money moving, as it did, for example, in recent years from Switzerland, which got a bit of a black eye a few years ago from the European Union. So money left Switzerland and went, for example, to Panama. There's now money leaving Panama and Switzerland and going to places like Wyoming and Nevada and Delaware in the United States, because they have very lax laws about figuring out who owns what, etc. So it's hard to see this as solving the problem, and I'd be fearful for the same reasons about political exposure. I guess what I'm leading up to is the following. Rather than try to hem in the abuse that wealthy people and huge corporations make of our tax system by the mechanisms of evasion, legal and illegal, that they sponsor and they impose, why don't we go to the root of the problem? We should not have huge concentrations of wealth, either in the hands of individuals or in the hands of particular corporations. Once we allow that, once we have a system that allows such inequality and then tries to have the government to come in and offset it a little bit, We are building in enormous incentives for the very tax avoidance and tax evasion that this system now displays to us. I would go to the root of the problem and talk about ways of changing fundamentally the inequality that breeds all of this.
Right, and that's quite high level, right? I mean, if you are taking the approach that that's the level where changes need to be made, you're basically saying this is not about limiting any particular corporation's ability or rights to manage these levels of money, and you would find probably opposition to those limits on both the left and the right for different reasons and in different ways. You're sort of setting the bar quite high. Is there not some intermediate area that could be attacked, at least in the short or medium term? Because as you've said before, the level of change that would make it impossible or more difficult to reduce the level of inequality may be far away, admittedly.
Well, I think my answer would be the following. I believe in reform. Reform the laws, reform the political exposure, as you put it earlier. Try this reform, try that reform, try the little steps, the medium steps. But if you discover that realistically, every time you do that, an escape mechanism is found. Every time you impose a new law, the very people that helped you write the law are then hired away by the objects of the law to help them escape the whole point and purpose of the law. Then at a certain point, it is no longer realistic to favor reform. Then you have to go to the higher bar, not because you would prefer it, not because you wouldn't rather have the small steps work, but because you recognize, rather than be self-deluded, that the small steps have all been tried, have all been evaded, avoided, amended, circumvented. At this point, you throw in the towel, and by virtue of your realism, you become someone who's much more interested in fundamental systemic change, because anything short of that has basically shown it is not enough to solve the problem.
In the U.S., sometimes it can be blinding to look at differences between Republicans and Democrats or liberals and conservatives. And as we've said, there are issues on which the dominant American political parties are quite different. And there are issues where they are almost indistinguishable. One of the things that has been illuminated for me by the Panama Papers are how, by and large, on these issues of plutocracy and wealth inequality and income inequality and everything that these leaks have dealt with, we see a sort of partnership or at least a shared indifference or interested in using these mechanisms from left and right around the world, have we not?
I think so. I think that the conventional left and right are, as a result of the very thing you've said, in very deep trouble. That the mass support for the status quo, whether it's center left or center right, is everywhere disappearing. It disappeared first in Greece in 2012. It disappeared in Portugal in 2015. It seems to me to be in the process of eroding seriously here in the United States. Mr. Cameron and Mr. Corbyn are light years apart in a way that Labour and the Conservatives haven't been in a long time in England. And I could go on and on and on. The so-called middle isn't holding and is giving way to the extremes. And that's not because the extremes are bad. It's because the middle is no longer tolerable for a growing portion of the population, precisely because of how, as you put it, what it has allowed to exist and what was revealed so dramatically in those Panama Papers.
What do you think will be the biggest consequence of these leaks, either as a sort of principle or even specifically, if you want to get into that?
Well, I think as a principle, you're going to see one politician after another caught in the limelight, one corporation or another caught in the limelight, and so on, basically doing what they have done now for years. This is not the first exposure. The Swiss went through a few years ago a whistleblower very high up in the Swiss financial circles who exposed what they were doing there, particularly with Americans escaping taxes here in the United States. And there have been other exposures before. The people involved wait for the media attention to fade, for the headlines to be out of fashion, and then they can go and muddy the water and pay their usual political flunkies to look the other way or to pass legislation that doesn't fundamentally deal with it. They're hoping to continue to do what they have done in each past case with this new exposure, try to make it a little more difficult for the next whistleblower or computer hacker to do his or her job. And continue. And that's why the middle is collapsing, because the mass of people are not anymore as easily brought along to join in this looking the other way, because their ox is being gored too. We're in a system in which more and more people feel they're getting the short end of the stick. And this kind of exposure simply drives that point deeper into their consciousness. When exactly all this will blow, I don't know. No one does. But I think you're seeing the signs of it with Trump's support on the right in this country, Mr. Sanders' support on the left in this country, and the growing calls of almost a clear majority now that the representatives of the middle are really the ones that are distrusted and in many cases really beginning to be hated for their being the ones who preside over nothing changes ever, and that's simply no longer tolerable.
Yeah, no doubt that this will be a great opportunity for elected officials around the world to talk about the legislation they introduced and sort of leaving it there without having to explain where else it went. Professor Emeritus of Economics at the University of Massachusetts, economist Richard Wolff, always great to have you on.
Thank you, David. I look forward to our next talk.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
As I've told you, even before tonight's primaries, Ted Cruz has no chance of securing the Republican nomination prior to the Republican convention. He needs more delegates than the total number of delegates that are still available. But there's a report out this morning from the Weekly Standard which says that the Cruz campaign is vetting former Republican presidential candidate and former Hewlett-Packard CEO Carly Fiorina as a possible vice presidential running mate. Sarah Isgur Flores, who helped run Fiorina's presidential campaign, told the Weekly Standard that Fiorina has turned over financial records to the Cruz campaign and that she sat down to talk with them. And the Weekly Standard points out that word of this vetting is coming out coincidentally a few weeks before the California primary, which is considered to be the state where Carly Fiorina, I guess, might have the most influence, although how much influence that is, I don't really know. Cruz campaign spokeswoman Alice Stewart said, "We've already announced publicly that we're vetting prospective VP nominees, but we haven't selected anyone and we have no decision to talk about at this point." What's the silver lining here, Lewis, that although Cruz has no chance of getting the nomination unless they give it to him, he's at least being thorough and vetting VPs?
Is it? Yeah. It's not even really precautionary, is it? Or do they know something we don't know?
It's a good match in a sense. I mean, both of them make my skin crawl. They're incredibly creepy and bizarre, maybe the creepiest and most bizarre candidates.
Yeah, I guess. Is it possible that that a move like this he thinks might stimulate his campaign a bit? And
you might guess, because of the timing and California, what if he were to announce? But usually there is not an announcement made before you are actually the nominee. Strategically, it's a disaster. Fiorina adds nothing positive to the Cruz campaign, would add nothing positive. And you really should pick a VP that at minimum won't hurt you. It's not clear that Fiorina wouldn't hurt Cruz.
Well, I'm looking at this from you're looking at it from your perspective. I'm looking at it from the Republican perspective.
Okay, hard to do.
I'm thinking it is quite difficult, but I'm thinking, okay, you've got a woman. That's in and of itself might help. And then you have the business aspect, which everyone seems to love about Trump, right? Oh, here's someone with business experience.
Yeah. And some of them loved it about Romney, too. And the question was, what historical realities can we point to suggest to us that good business people would make good presidents? And we had zero. There was no reason at all to think that being a good business person, if that's what she was, and as we know, she destroyed Hewlett-Packard and left with a huge golden parachute, we don't actually have empirical data to suggest that a good business person is someone who would make the best president.
We don't, but that doesn't stop people from thinking it.
Yeah, that's true. It's hard to think of a more unlikable pair than Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina, but maybe this would get Donald Trump to reconsider Sarah Palin as his running mate. That I would donate something to someone to make Sarah Palin the running mate again for whoever is the Republican nominee.
No one is going to make that mistake again. That's a disaster. Have you seen Trump's face while Sarah Palin is talking?
Yeah, it looks painful.
Trying to endorse him. Yeah.
Donald Trump has successfully capitalized on the pretty obvious but not often publicly spoken about xenophobia in the Republican electorate by using this nativist rhetoric to coalesce and catalyze those ideas behind his campaign. That's sort of on the one hand. That's how Donald Trump has used the hateful rhetoric to help himself. On the other hand, is a very real and sort of existential problem for the Republican Party as we know it. There was a national poll released late last week by America's Voice and Latino Decisions, and it found that 79% of voters had a very unfavorable opinion of Trump. And if you subdivide that and look at Latino voters had an 87% generally unfavorable opinion of Donald Trump. And when they were asked about Trump's policy plan to deport the more than 11 million undocumented immigrants that are presumed to be in the U.S., 80% of Latino voters indicated that they were much less likely to vote for Trump as a result of that. 87% of voters saying they were less likely to vote for Trump generally. But what if Donald Trump isn't the nominee? Is Trump the only Republican who's having trouble with Latino voters? No. Even Senator Ted Cruz, who is to some extent Hispanic, right? I mean, he doesn't really play that identity up, except every once in a while trying to speak some broken Spanish to Marco Rubio on the debate stage. Ted Cruz is also having a problem with Latino voters. There are 34% who have a very unfavorable rating of Ted Cruz among Latino voters, 52% who have an unfavorable rating generally. And even when voters were told that Ted Cruz supports deporting the country's undocumented population, 61% of Latino voters said they are much less likely to vote for Ted Cruz. And lastly, the last bit of data which should terrify Republicans is that Latino voters appear to be increasingly enthusiastic about voting in November. And this is problematic for a number of reasons. Number one, we've talked, Lewis, about the changing demographics of the U.S., and Republicans can no longer just depend on the white vote to win elections. It probably won't work in 2016. By 2020, it definitely won't work because of the changing demographics. In addition to that, with the exception of Cubans, who tend to be the more conservative Latino voters in the United States, Latino voters are very, very liberal and tend to vote Democratic. So on a number of fronts, this is really, really a problem for the Republican Party. These results should horrify them.
Yeah, and those numbers aren't surprising. When it's the party of racism, it's the party of xenophobia.
Yep.
And why on earth would you support it as someone who is not white? And we've said that the Republican Party really needs to change. You would have thought that this would be the election where that might happen. Not so much. And so I'm wondering, how long is it going to take for them to start having candidates that Latinos will vote for? 4 years, 8 years?
Well, we will see what happens in terms of this year. If Donald Trump is the nominee, and that is by no means a foregone conclusion right now, I believe that a traditionally red state will go blue. It could be Arizona. It could be Georgia. There are Democratic strategists that are part of the Turn Texas Blue movement. I think that if it's going to happen, is still not immediately ahead of us. But Arizona or Georgia could definitely go blue if Donald Trump is the nominee for a number of reasons, particularly in Arizona, because of the Latino vote. This could be an incredibly unique election. We have a voicemail number that you can call any time of day. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a voicemail I received.
Yo, David Pakman. I like the show. You guys are great. Just want to talk about the subject of gender identity in bathrooms. And this subject seems to be all over the news, and I think we're spending a little too much time with it, making it a little too much harder than it is. I think you should just simplify the whole thing down to, well, if you have a swinging steak between your legs, you go into the men's room. And if you don't have a swinging steak between your legs, you go into the women's bathroom.
All right, let's stop it there. Yeah, I think we are spending too much time on it, but not in terms of reporting. This is now becoming the new bigotry front for many on the religious right, and it needs to be exposed in the same way that we were exposing anti-gay bigotry, et cetera, et cetera. It is the people who are spending too much time on it are those who are in states that are atrocious and abysmal when it comes to just about every marker and indicator and tracking data that we have, be it health or education or whatever. And meanwhile, they are expending resources into trying to pass laws about who goes in which bathroom. They're the ones spending too much time on it. To the extent that they continue to do that and waste resources, we will continue to report on it. On today's bonus show, Cleveland police pay $6 million to Tamir Rice's family. Also, pastoral medicine is on the rise. What exactly is pastoral medicine, and how can you be certified in pastoral medicine, if at all? Those stories and more on the bonus show. Sign up today. Get instant access. davidpakman.com/membership. This is viewer-supported media. Take control of alternatives to homogenous corporate media by signing up today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.